you can believe in yourself to an extent, but until you actually start to take actions for it, that fake it until you make it can only last so long. You can fake confidence for a period of time, but eventually your self goes, I got you figured out, man. This ain't working. So you can have a combination of, hey, you have to exude your level of confidence. Not I'm this badass and, see what I can do kind of confidence, but speak differently about yourself, think differently about yourself. When you feel yourself doubting yourself, ask why you're doubting yourself and ask yourself if it's true. But I spent too much time focusing just on the big goal instead of focusing on celebrating the steps I achieved along the way.
Hey, Jerry.
Lawrence, good to see you, brother. Nice to be on the show.
Well, thank you. Can we start maybe a little bit in your own words, a bit of your background about what you do? And I can see you're a fellow fitness buff like me. You love working out, but maybe a little bit about your background of who you are today.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So I'm not in the jujitsu world like you. I'm certainly not a maniac like that. But I've been in the weight room since I was probably, 13 years old. I'm 39 now. So, 26 years I've had myself in the weight room. That was a big part of it's been a big part of my life ever since then. My brother-in-law bought a gym when I was probably 21 or 22, and I got in there and he had me working the front desk, and I jumped in there, and eventually people saw me and they're like, "Hey, you want to start training me?" I'm like, "Sure, that sounds fine." I didn't have a certification, didn't have any inkling of what I wanted to do. So, people asked me, so I took their money and started training them. One thing led to another, and I ended up opening my own facility a couple of years after that, and had it for 10 years. I actually got out of that last year, opened it in 2013, got out of it in 2023. So since then, I've been transitioning myself online. I've been focusing on, content development, have my own podcast as well called The Good Wolf Project, and kind of in the process of building an e-learning business, if you will, with a little bit of coaching mixed in. So it's been an interesting ride from in-person brick and mortar life to online, not seeing people as much life. It is much different.
Well, how is running the gym? Because I know gyms are notorious, right? Gyms and restaurants are notorious for being really tough business models. How was it having your own gym for a decade?
I loved it a bunch because we focus a lot on community. We would do regular events where we would go out either into the community and do like cleanup days, or we would go out as a group and go do something together, go ride bikes or go kayaking. We had a yearly kayaking thing that we would do together. So we were very intentional about building a community of like-minded people. Our purpose, which I still remember to this day, I've only been out of it for 6 months at this point, was we built a purposeful community. That was our goal and all of that. So we did that, and I loved it. Of course, it was tough. Any fitness studio owner will tell you it's most of the time, unless you're in Manhattan or a really popular, that's being fit is very trendy. Hmm. It's just going to be a thing that you do because you love doing it. So our max members, we had 125 members at our max, which is good considering the population of the town we were in was 12,000 people. That's 1% of the population, which I think is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty good. You ask any business owner if they want 1% of the population of their town to come to them, they'll probably tell you, yeah. So, we did a good job. We changed a lot of lives. We helped a lot of people. I loved it a lot. But at the end of the day, so I'll tell you a little bit about how I got out of it. I actually ended up closing it down. We just had a number of things going on. I had to replace a coach, and then the coach I replaced her with, a couple months later, she got antsy and she wanted to leave. We had an event that didn't go all that well. It seemed like the people around us just weren't really engaging with us as much as they used to. Man, we had a bad August. Just there were a number of things that just, started checking boxes. And I went out of town and I was walking on the beach and I was thinking about what I needed to do. And the thought went through my head, to close the gym, which the real thought had never gone through my head, right? As a business owner, you think, oh, I just want to close this thing down, but it's more of a haphazard, whatever joke, if you will. But I never had the real thought. But the real thought went through my head. And as soon as it did, my mind and body relaxed. And when my mind and body relaxed, I knew that that's probably what I needed to do. So long story short, I loved every bit of it. But when it was time to be done, it was time to be done.
Yeah. There's something that I find very refreshing about seasons of life. And it sounds like you gave it a great decade. I'm sure you got a lot out of it. You helped a numerous amount of people over the years. But like you said, when you get that feeling, you just know that's your intuition, your subconscious, like your body relaxing. You just feel happy at the thought of ending something. You've got to do it. And I think one of the hardest things that I found in life, Jerry, is trying to figure out when to give up something versus when to keep fighting for something. Because so much of success is about perseverance and grit and just keep going. But for instance, if you're in a bad relationship and you're trying to force a square peg in a round hole, some of the most successful entrepreneurs have the most dysfunctional relationships because they're not used to quitting and they think that they can fix everything through hard work. And I think relationships are a great example of something where if you're not compatible, you're not compatible. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can meet someone who you are compatible with. So kudos to you for not being stubborn and kind of seeing the writing on the wall and the way you felt about it and then deciding, okay, it's time for a change.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. To be fair, I was probably stubborn longer than I needed to be. And ironically enough, I also got divorced last year. I don't laugh because it's funny. I laugh because it's just ironic. But I also got divorced last year. We were married for also 10 years. And it was also one of those things where there were signs that we weren't compatible probably 3 years in, probably before that. But, you tend to overlook them in the first couple of years. So 3 to 5 years in, there were signs. But the stubbornness in me was just willing to kind of push forward and try and work through it. And it would work well sometimes. And then we'd just clash heads sometimes. But anyway, we kind of officially figured it out and said, hey, we just, again, toss the ball over the fence and you got to do what you got to do. So I tend to lean more toward stubborn. I'm going to figure out how to make it work. Cause like you said, too many people are on the way other side where they just have a low, what I call frustration tolerance. In other words, as soon as something frustrates them a little bit, they give up. It's just like, oh, I just don't feel like pushing through this thing. And it could be something very simple. You're trying to lose some weight and you hit 10 pounds and then it just stops for a week. And you're like, oh, I don't feel like figuring this out. Well, all you need to do is either wait a week and just keep doing the same thing and it'll figure itself out, or just make a small tweak. So too many people are on that side. And I actually think I need to figure out the way that I look at it, or the way that someone said it to me is, you don't need to change what you're doing. You just need to change the strategy of what you're doing so that you can make progress maybe a little more effectively. So I don't think I changed strategies enough in the business fast enough to be able to make progress effectively. But anyway, I totally agree with you as far as persistence is the thing that's necessary. Ironically, I just happen to be one of the people that sits on the far side of persistence, which most people would call stubbornness. So, you figured it out.
Well, I think anyone that's successful in life has to have an element of that stubbornness, because it's like you said, you've been in the gym consistently for a quarter of a century. Like, that being in shape and living a healthy lifestyle takes consistent hard work, and you have that same philosophy about business and life. And I feel like any successful person they're gonna probably be a little bit over the side of too stubborn, and that's going to be the biggest challenge for Type A people, is realizing when to back away, when to accept a defeat so you can fight a battle that's more to your nature and capacities.
Well, the biggest thing for me was, and this is going to sound maybe nonsensical to people who don't understand, but I knew that there was a bigger purpose. So even though impacting 125 people is a big deal, and I totally get that, I knew that there was more available to impact. There were more people out there that I knew that there was a bigger reach available to be able to do that. And I knew that online was the way to do it. And there was actually a period of time where I like, well, I'll try both of these things at the same time, running the business and building something online to see if I can get something churning over here. But I'm sure you've tried a couple of things at the same time, or it's tough to do. Again, being a fitness studio owner, and it's just, you're the one running the studio. You're the one there. You're the one doing it most of the time. So once my attention started going away from that, and I started to try and do this online thing at the same time, then the studio would get hurt. And that's the way things are. And that also played kind of a part in it. Is I know that there's something else out there, and unless I decide to put my attention to that, it's never going to just happen.
One of the biggest challenges I feel like for people in the online space is it's so overcrowded with people that are kind of faking it till they make it kind of thing. And then you have some really amazing people on there too. And it's just about trying to get the viewership and the reach. People have so many choices, and it's hard a lot of time on first glance to tell who's legit and who's not. And that's got to be one of your biggest struggles, isn't it? It's just getting noticed amid so many people who are all vying for people's attention.
It really is, because the irony is I have 15 years of experience in training itself, 10 years owning a business. So it's not the experience that is the problem. It's like you said, it's just the attention. It's just right. Grabbing the attention of people, which is partly learning what it takes to grab attention. So that's a strategy in and of itself. Grabbing attention online. I can, in a brick and mortar space, I can more easily grab attention because I know that I have this demographic, this circle to work with, a 5-mile radius. That's what I have to work with. Cool. I can grab that. I can do that. But when you're talking about grabbing attention online, that's a completely different beast in and of itself. So you have to play the game at the same time so that you can get the attention necessary. And you can play the long game, or you can figure out how to play the short game. So the short game is essentially do the goofy stuff or the polarizing stuff that grabs attention, which you can figure out how to do that in I
was going to say, like, kind of an authentic way. Like, where you're being authentic to yourself.
Authentic's good too. Yep, authentic's good too. So it's not like you're just doing it just for the sake of only grabbing attention. You're doing it because you believe it, but also it's not destructive to society. Because I believe that a lot of the attention-grabbing nonsense out there is more destructive to society than anything else. But that's another story in and of itself. But yeah, it's, there's a lot of people doing it. At the same time, there's a lot of people online. You go, yeah, it's watered down, but there's also 5 billion people on the internet. So you got customers available. All you need is 1,000 good ones to be able to pay $100 regularly, and you got yourself a good living. You just got to be patient enough to do it.
So how's it been? So the last year you've had all these transitions. You ended a marriage. You changed from being online from being bricks and mortar to online. How's it been? How's the last year been?
It's been, like I said, it's been interesting. First of all, being single, even though you're with somebody that you're not really getting along with, you're used to having somebody around all the time, right?
Yeah.
So that's been an interesting transition. I can feel myself just wanting to be around somebody, just to have them there to talk to or just to hang out with or whatever. So I can definitely feel that. So that's been an interesting transition. I didn't realize that having that other person around, just the mere having them in your presence kind of thing, was so obvious, or so attractive, just right. Being with them. You see what I'm saying?
I was going to say, that's the companionship, right? You've had a companion there for a decade of your life. That is a huge transition to not have that anymore.
It is. And like I said, divorce is not this thing. I feel like it's played up a little bit today, where maybe it's mostly women, and I don't mean that in a prejudiced way. That's just where I've seen it mostly. They're like, oh, congratulations, you're free.
Right.
It's just not like that. Even though my ex-wife and I weren't compatible, and especially for the last year in our marriage, we didn't really get along all that often. I still care about her. I still love her. We were still together for 10 years.
Mhm.
So yeah, most definitely. Like she was still a companion of mine for 10 years that knows me and was with me and went through hard things and went through struggles. Like that's all real. So I don't know. I think it's overplayed the whole like, oh, you're married. You can go be free now, or you can go find somebody new. Like, no, I don't find that exciting. That's not the reason I did this. So because I thought the grass was greener on the other side. But, I believed at the same time that we could both have better lives with somebody else. I don't know if that's just me justifying the grass is greener or what, but yeah, that companionship's real, man. I think you take it for granted until it's gone.
Well, you have a very mature mindset, because so many people, whatever they're in, whether they're in a bad relationship or whether they're single, and they look at someone like me who's happily married, it's easy to say, oh, it's easy for them. They won't have any problems that I have. But even a good marriage or a good relationship is not always easy. And that's what I try and tell my friends. Like, whatever situation you are in life, you have to remember that life is about trade-offs, and very few things are black and white, good or bad. I'm very happy in my situation, but of course, there's trade-offs. I don't have the same flexibility as some of my single friends. I have to have a lot more responsibility. That's a little weight on your shoulders. And sometimes even like, I think we're incredibly compatible. Even having said that, we still bicker about things, So you have a very mature mindset to relationships that a lot of people don't have. A lot of people live in an ideal world. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've got so many friends of either my wife's female friends or my male friends who just can't meet somebody. And I think a lot of it is because their expectations are very unrealistic, and they're kind of idealizing things, and life is not so ideal. So kudos to you for having such a mature mindset on relationships.
Well, I appreciate that. With 10 years, of experience, and also working through a divorce, a lot of that was found in the working through the divorce, because her and I spent a lot of time sitting and talking and trying to figure things out and deciding, and how are things, is this the way we want it to be, and just talking. What did you think during this process? How did you feel during this process? So, I think if you're just open to recognizing that your partner has a good view of you, and that if you just listen sometimes, now they have to be able to deliver it in a way that you'll hear it, and that's important. But if you'll just listen sometimes, you'll be able to have a better relationship. And it's hard, especially as a man, because you're like, just get off my back, quit messing with me. You just want to be the guy, you want to be yourself, you want to, whatever it is. But if you just take some time to just sit back and go, okay, I can do some things better. Fine. Can you help me understand what it is that I'm actually doing that's, causing you to be upset? Or what am I being blind about? Because we all have blind spots. So if you can listen to your partner about the blind spots that you have, life will just be much, much easier. And they should be able to do the same for you, by the way.
Yeah. Well, my wife's a therapist, so it's been very unusual.
There you go.
We have some very funny conversations sometimes where she'll psychoanalyze me over dinner, and it's great. It's actually it's very great. I think I've become a much better partner having lived with her, and just over time, she's very subtly kind of just shown me some of my tendencies, and she used to say in the early days, like, I think you're fighting with your ex-girlfriend because you're not fighting with me right now, and I think it's. You have a podcast. I see books behind you. You're obviously an introspective person, just like I am. But I think there's some level with people like us where, I joke with one of my good friends who's very intellectual. Shout out to my buddy Brad. But we're always joking. We're like, we're barely evolved chimps. We really are. We have so many of those basic, Neanderthal mindset on so many things. And definitely when things get heated, that tends to come out, right? It's the reptilian brain. So it's so funny that you recognize that. It's awesome. And then I cut you off. You were saying, so transitioning from just being around people in person to online, I'm sure it's great in the sense of you have a lot more flexibility. And like you said, you have a much bigger pool to draw from. But at the same time, I don't know if you get this, I'm lucky that I do a blend of both. So I'm online a lot for work, but I also meet people in person a lot. And I know a lot of people that are doing a lot of online stuff. It's a lot of time behind technology and they're not really interacting with people, and humans are social creatures, right? So you're used to interacting with people physically and in person, and then suddenly you change this online world. Like, has that been a tough transition?
It has been. And I'm a natural, I guess you would call an introvert. So, I'm okay by myself. But once that part of it went away, I was used to being around people all day. From I'd get there at whatever time I get there, 8 o'clock in the morning, until I'd leave at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I was around people all day. And I knew that I could just go down and find somebody and I could talk to them and joke and have a good time. And when I was on the floor training, I got to have a good time with people and be hands on and do that kind of thing. And as soon as that went away, like, yeah, definitely there was an empty part of me, because we are, and even like this, the podcast thing, talking to somebody on Zoom is much different than talking to somebody in real life. I can converse with you and we can go back and forth and we can kind of see each other's mannerisms and so on and so forth. But getting the vibes off of somebody in real life, actually being able to feel their energy in real life, it's a much different thing.
Yes.
So while that certainly scratches part of the itch, being able to do podcasts and see people that way, there's certainly a big part of just being around people. And I honestly think, like, when the world shut down for whatever it was, 3 months, 6 months, depending on what state you were in, maybe longer than that, and we weren't around each other, I feel like that's why people got so pissed off, is because we just weren't around each other. We just didn't feel the vibes of other people. We just didn't get around people and laugh and joke and have a good time and socialize and so on and so forth. We did it all on Zoom, but clearly that wasn't making us happy. So that's definitely a big part of it. So I have to purposely build that into my life now. I go and have coffee with people once or twice a week. I got a buddy. I go out to his farm with him and we'll go tear trees apart. I got other friends that I'll go, do some things with. So I didn't have to be as purposeful about it before, but I definitely have to be purposeful now, because it definitely feels, you can feel it. I feel a little more anxious when I'm not around people as often.
Yeah, 100%. That was 2020 was such an interesting year. There were so many things where there'd be days where I'm just like, oh, wish I didn't have to work today. And then as soon as you get things taken away from you, like the ability to work and the ability to, you don't have the ability to see people, talk about making you appreciate the small things. Like, I had a friend who would always complain about working. And then as soon as he couldn't work, he was like, I just want to work, so it was so good for people to realize what's important in life, and man, yeah, it was. I was in Chicago, and Illinois locked down hard. I mean, they tried to stop me running on the lakefront at midnight by myself. The cops, it was brutal. And looking back, they were
Wow.
so wrong with no consequences. How many businesses were ruined? Oh God, I'm still bitter. I'm still bitter because I just think it was bureaucrats making really bad decisions with no consequences, and countless lives were ruined. And as an entrepreneur since I was a kid, I just feel for people. I was okay. I lost a little bit, and I had some things. I had some real estate developments going on that I kind of got screwed over out of some money, but it didn't ruin me. I can only imagine if I was 50 years old and I'd put 30 years of my life into growing, building a restaurant or something like that, and they just decided to shut me down, but they would still cater food to the movie going on next door because the movie lobbyists were in with the politicians. That kind of stuff, man. Oh, just really frustrates me.
Oh my gosh. This is a rabbit hole we could definitely go down for many hours. But yeah, I mean, just the fact, I mean, in my mind, it seems somewhat blatantly obvious as far as like where loyalties lie when it comes to politics. Why were big companies able to stay open and small companies needed to close? Why? Well, because they're safer. How are they safer? There's more people in them. It makes zero sense. So it's very clear where loyalties lie and how the game was played during that time, and the transition of money finances that has happened since that time makes it very obvious that, maybe not obvious. I would wonder why, if you didn't think that was intentional, is maybe not the word I want to use, but potentially deliberate because of the transition of finances, it would make me wonder if you're not questioning that. If you're not questioning if that was a potentially deliberate time period, it's just a different way to think about it. You got to be able to think and poke through what you hear on Fox News or CNN or whatever, and you got to be able to go, I wonder what's actually going on here. But anyway, without going too far down that rabbit hole, I understand.
Which I think the idea of following the money is something that I'm very fond of. And if you follow the money and you look at people going, in and out of things like the FDA to the government to pharmaceutical companies, this revolving door of people going back and forth, and that just the fact that all these politicians own vast holdings of things that went up a lot while the everyday person is crushed by inflation. That's actually one of my passions, is just trying to, my day job in real estate is I'm trying to spread the message that you don't have to buy real estate, but you have to understand, if you don't have real assets, we live in an inflationary world where the rich who have assets just keep getting richer because Nvidia stock keeps going up and real estate keeps going up and gold is creeping up and all these real assets are going up. And the poor people that are struggling with 2-3 jobs, trying to raise kids with no assets, and they're renting a place that the rent keeps going up, they're always going to be behind the 8 ball. And talking about different ways of looking at things, something very interesting that I never really thought about before, and as a real estate guy, I should have thought about this, is if you rent a place, you're not neutral real estate, you're negative real estate. And if you own the house you live in, you're neutral real estate. You have to have your house you live in and an investment property to be weighted in real estate. So that's the thing, is that a lot of people get confused, is if you're renting and you think, oh, I'll buy real estate later or something like that, that's fine. You can put money in stocks and do very well, but you're negative a market that historically only goes up. And we all need a place to live. And it's such a interesting way of looking at it, because I never thought about it like that. But yeah, the idea of just the wealthy having assets and doing everything in public policy the way we overspend the deficit and things like that, they're going to naturally keep creating money to pay for these programs, to send to foreign wars, all these crazy things that people are doing. And who is impacted the most? It's the people that don't have assets that are struggling with inflation. So it's a message that I just feel so bad, because I have assets and I've had ups and downs, and I've had a rough few years with different things and lawsuits and getting screwed over by people, but I'm still okay. And there's people that are not okay, but they haven't done anything wrong. They put their head down, they work hard, they just don't have the financial education to understand the world in which we live in. I think that's such a powerful concept.
So I don't know, it was 10 years ago I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think that's the name of it. Very popular book. I think definitely every real estate person has read it. If not every person, so many people involved in investing and so forth have read that book. But he says in the book that a home is not an asset. And you basically just explained to an extent why you are neutral if you own a home. The reason that a home is not technically an asset, it is because you can buy it and then sell it, and hopefully it appreciates and you make some money off of it. But an asset in investing terms is something that returns money to you. That's rental property and things like that. Things that are going to be, if you accumulate enough of them, this is where the general population has a hard time, right, grasping this. Why should I put money into something and wait to see if it's going to bring money back when I can just go buy something with my money? Well, the reason is, if you accumulate enough of them, then eventually all of your bills are paid. Eventually. If you accumulate enough rental properties, if you accumulate enough multi-purpose, multi-use properties, if you accumulate enough good quality dividend paying stocks, if you accumulate enough, whatever the thing is that's paying you in return, if you accumulate enough of it, eventually it'll pay you money enough back that you'll be making money, and you can also still sell the thing and make money off the thing. And so I think understanding that distinction, that a house is not an asset in the sense that it doesn't pay you anything, you just bought it. And really, One thing that I have kind of shifted my mind on owning versus renting, which you make a very good point about being net negative if you are renting. At the same time, you have to put a chunk of change down on a house when you buy a house. So I'm curious your thoughts on, if like you're just getting started and you're wanting to get into a house, but you got this $50,000 or $80,000 and you have it available, would it make more sense to go rent for some period of time, take that $80,000, throw it into something that you can buy and rent? or does it make sense to go ahead and buy the house? You see what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah. And I think
What are your thoughts on that?
so if you don't have enough money to buy the place you want, I think it's okay to I think it's smart to put it in something like an S&P fund or something that is also hopefully gonna kind of move similarly to the stock to the real estate market. The problem is there's times like if you look at the decade of the 1970s is the last time we had really high inflation. During that decade, I think if you adjust it for inflation, the S&P was pretty much flat, but real estate went up 300%. So that's the last time we saw like the kind of inflation we're seeing. But I think the real secret is trying to take advantage of what you've got. So what you have is these government programs. Right now, there's a program where you have 5% down to buy a multi-unit up to like 1.2 million. And a lot of people, and so you can buy $1 million with 5% down. That's 50 grand. A lot of people don't have 50 grand sitting around, but there's different ways you can do things like closing credits from the seller. And maybe you can get that down to 3%. And maybe you can tap into anyone, a long lost aunt who has money that maybe will be able to lend you some money. So I always tell people like, try to get as much knowledge about the options open to you. And if the government is incentivized, like that 5% loan, that only came about a few months ago because before that, there was a 3.5% FHA loan. And now that doesn't work above 2 units because the bank has these reserve requirements that basically nothing works when interest rates are this high. So they came with this new program to try and incentivize home ownership. So I think that idea of just trying to get as much knowledge as you can, like what are my options? And then, tap into anyone that that maybe will be able to help you out. And if there's no one, maybe you have an asset you can sell or something. But ideally, especially if you're young, you want to buy a building with a few units, live in one of the units. You have to do it for 1 year, and then you can move out. And it would even make sense if it's in a bad area of the city, like I'm in Chicago. Most of the buildings that make good money are not in the best areas you want to live. Well, you can live there 1 year and then you can go into a nice area and just rent a nice, 1 bedroom or something. And you can live in a nice area while you have this thing just making money. And then over time, like you said, rents are going to go up. The real estate property is going to appreciate. You're paying down your debts. But what a lot of people don't realize is if you make money and you pay taxes, the biggest thing for a lot of people, even if a real estate investment's breaking even, is all the tax write-offs. So it's like that back end savings every time you do your taxes. So it's just trying to learn all this stuff. It's so overwhelming, isn't it? Because they don't like. I came from a finance background. I have an MBA in finance. I didn't do one class on real estate investing. I didn't even know about real estate investing until I figured it out maybe 10 years later. And even then, when I look back, when I bought my first property, I was so clueless. For a smart guy who's read a lot and he's educated, I look back and I just knew nothing because it was that niche, environment, that niche amount of knowledge. But then think about all these other things that we want to know about. Like, you and I were both into fitness and working out. What about trying to just eat well and like all this crap they're putting in our food? It's like living today. It's the best of times and the worst of times. Like I love the fact that you and I can be in different states and we can jump on a Zoom call. Like I don't take that for granted. Like technology is amazing for certain things, but at the same time, just that the wealth of information, kind of like what we said earlier about you could be the best coach in the world, but if you don't have the visibility, people won't be able to find you in a sea of average coaches, right? So it's the same thing with just all the knowledge out there. What do we pay attention on? Do we want to pay attention to all the shit that's going with our government sending millions of dollars to fund these overseas wars? Or do we want to figure out how the hell we can eat food without all this crap in it that's ruining our testosterone levels? So there's just so much to pay attention to. And I think that's what a time to be alive. We've never had this struggle before where you have access to infinite amount of information in the cell phone in your pocket.
Well, here's the irony is that if you read books so I've recently been reading a lot of older books, and most of these are from the 70s and 80s, which isn't terribly old, but I've read books from like the late 1800s. I've also read plenty of philosophy from mid 1500s to around year 1000 to, further down the line to the BCs. There's regular ideas in there about having too much information. In 1970, there's books about how they're talking about how we have too many distractions. We have too much information. From 1900s, too many distractions, newspapers, all this stuff we got to pay attention to. So if they had too many distractions in the 1900s and in the 1970s, we are just, it's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. how much we have, how much distraction capability we have. So in the 1970s, you still are trying to like get information. You still have to do some level of work to get information. But once the internet came around, you didn't have to do a whole lot of work. Of course, if you grew up like we did with AOL, then you still had to sit on dial up and listen to the dial up tone and all that fun stuff. But you didn't have to do a whole lot of work to get information, right? And now we don't have to do any work. We have to do zero work. We actually have to do the opposite, I believe. We have to figure out what information we want. And instead of just taking in constant information, we have to go seek the information we want and then just let the rest of it be. You just have to learn to let it go, really, to be honest. Because human beings just have this tendency they just want to be in the know and they want to feel part of the group. And that's part of the reason I believe why so many people just want to scroll through stuff and read stuff and know everything, because they want to be able to talk to their friends and talk about the newest, dumb video that they saw on TikTok or the newest piece of news or this, that, and the other thing. So unless you start to actively say no and seek out the information you want instead of just, being controlled by it all, it's always going to feel overwhelming, and it's always going to feel, I don't know, honestly, you'll always be a little dumber if you just let it come to you and try and have all information instead of actively seeking out information and blocking the rest of it.
So true. I know that exact feeling with my work in real estate, where you get the nature of the business is you get a lot of incoming messages. So right now, I love these conversations because my phone's off and I'm just talking to you. Whereas as soon as we finish this, I'm going to turn on my phone and there's going to be a bunch of stuff that's going to come back, messages, voicemails, got to call this guy back, I've got to send this email and all stuff. And it's very overwhelming. And I've got a good friend who said, problems arise when your inputs exceed your throughputs, meaning our brain just can't process all that information. And I feel like that's the case for so many people. And I love what you said actually about reading old books, because I think I reread Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and that was written something like 80 years ago. And like you said, it was like he's talking about the same problems then that we talk about now. He was talking about like corrupt people in media, corrupt people in business, just people ripping each other off, that the challenges of an entrepreneur. And I feel like those challenges 80 years ago, yeah, of course we have technology now, but it's the same basic human nature and the same challenges that a lot of people are dealing with. And I think if a book survives 50 years or 100 years, there's obviously so much wisdom in there. That's why it survived. Whereas new books that come out, you don't really have, they haven't stood the test of time. So anything that's been written a long time ago that people are still talking about tends to be, have some really good wisdom. And actually, Think and Grow Rich, that book is, I feel like that's been cited by the most number of entrepreneurs that I talk to as starting people down the entrepreneurial journey, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, most definitely. That book, I read it 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever it was, right when I started my entrepreneurial journey. So that's a very regular thing. But you're 100% right about how long has a book been around and how relevant is the book still? How many people still talk about the book? And if it's 50 years old and people are still talking about it, it's still relevant. It doesn't matter if it was written 50 years ago. If it's 1,000 years ago, Stoic philosophy, for instance, is pretty popular right now. And I've read, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I've read stuff from Seneca and so on and so forth. I've read a bunch of that. It's so relevant because it is so useful to today. It shows you that human nature does not change. The only thing that changes is the things that we have available to us. Technology, the environment is the only thing that changes. It's what we have available to us. And the problem is what we have available to us today allows for instant, just everything, just instant communication, instant this, instant intake, instant so forth. And the human brain just has no clue how to deal with it. Has no clue how to deal with it. The inputs problem that you're talking about. So you're 100% correct about the books.
That's so funny because when I read things from Marcus Aurelius, it really could be a guy living today writing about today's problems, and it's 2,000 years old. It's such a good reminder that there's a saying. My mom's originally from France, and there's a French saying that says, "The more things change, the more things stay the same." And I think that's what it means. There's certain themes about human nature that just they stand the test of time through millennia, and it's that's it's just so funny. So, but I'm glad that you're reading that stuff because that's some, I think, in terms of practical wisdom, I don't think anything applies more to just good life advice for people than stoicism and stoic philosophy.
If people could just take a second to sit down and read and give books a try again, instead of getting caught up, like I said, in the 10-second, even 60, how many people even watch 60-second videos,
Yeah.
but 10-second video clips, short headline reads. Most people get their information from headlines and from like 10-second videos. And how can you even call that living a life if you're getting information from headlines? Because most people don't even get past the headline. And that's why headlines are so polarizing today.
Yeah.
They need to grab your attention and they need to convey some sort of message. And there's so many headlines that don't actually tell the story of what's happening. They just grab your attention. And that's where people get their information from. So you cannot build knowledge and wisdom through snippets. It just can't happen. So if you start to take in if you can sit down with some sort of longer form, something, and take in and start to think and question things, then you can maybe start to see reality differently. And that's where people have a hard time, is they just see reality in a certain way, and it's viewed through this 10-second, lens of the way we've been programmed to look at our phones, instead of being able to sit down and go through a book or go through a long article and be able to read it and digest some information and think differently about things and gain different insights.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of the things that kind of pisses me off most about myself and living in today's world, especially the work I do, is I feel like I've lost my ability to really focus. And I think when I was younger, I could sit in, like, I think about myself as a late teenager, and I had an older brother who was he was a very good influence in the sense that he used to tell me, like, stop eating shitty food, go work out, like get into exercise as being a habit, and read books, like educate yourself, not books for school, books for life, like, philosophy and good literature and these classic books. And so he really got me into reading. And I remember some of my childhood memories sitting outside in my parents' backyard in the sun for like 2 hours, just reading a book, just completely focused. Now I have to leave my phone in the furthest area of the house, or like leave it inside and go outside. Like, you have to physically be away from these things because they're so addictive. And it's so hard every time my brain is in a situation where I'm really trying to focus on something. These thoughts keep popping up, like, oh, I didn't text this guy back, and you've got to email this contract over, and oh, this listing. Like, it's this constant battle that we have. And you're so right. Like, I'm so much happier when I'm just at peace with some thoughts and being able to go deep in things, as opposed to just that surface level bullshit. It's like you can spend your whole day going through the day like that, and you just feel awful afterwards,
Yeah. Have you really gotten anything done, and do you really feel good about it? If you just sat there and all you've done is some high level nonsense, some of which is necessary, right? Texting people back, especially for you. I have a real estate friend who's, I train with them one day a week, and we communicate regularly throughout the week. And it gives me anxiety with how much he's on his phone. And I'm sure it's very similar to you. He constantly is picking it up, texting people back, emails, opens up an email, looking at the contract, replying back. We'll be working out. His phone will ring. He'll pick it up. I'm like, oh, dude, you're killing me right now. So honestly, I'm sure it's very similar.
Like, it's like it's a necessity of of the business, like a necessary evil. But that's one of the reasons I love jujitsu, is because when I got a guy trying to choke me out, I can't be thinking about the email I didn't send, or you really are in the moment. And I feel like the more things that I can do being in the moment is that's a good life. And it's so difficult. It's one thing I've learned from having a young son and always having dogs, is one of the things that they're always in the moment. They're not worrying about the future or thinking about the past. They are there being present. And that feels like a lost art, just being present. And that's one of the reasons, like, I'm sure when you're a host as well, like when you're talking to people on podcasts, like for me, the biggest thing about these conversations, I love the fact that you have this awesome network of people from around the world that like-minded kindred spirits, I always say. But it's also just this actual just being here and being present with you. It's such a rare thing. Like, I'm sure you've had the same thing where I'm at dinner with a couple of buddies, and like they can't go 2 seconds without looking at someone's Instagram story, and it's like, bro, I'm right here. And
No
I've been
doubt.
guilty of that sometimes too, but I think I do it less than
Yep.
some of my friends. But it's something that we've all got to fight against, because these fucking social media companies have made these apps so damn addictive to our basic wiring in our brain, that we're just so addicted
Yep.
to those dopamine hits from these new, red notifications going off on our phone.
100% right about that. So I have some rules. So I'm very different when it comes to my phone. I'm very deliberate and very purposeful when it comes to my phone. I'll give you my rundown, and you can tell me how much anxiety it gives you. So, because it gives most people a lot of anxiety, which is ironic, like you said, because our brains have changed because of phones. Exactly
100%.
what you're talking about. You can walk away from your phone for 5 minutes, and your brain starts to tinker and starts to go, well, I wonder. I wonder if somebody's text me back. I wonder if there's a message. I wonder if I got if someone liked my photo on Instagram. So if you look at my phone, which I don't even know where my phone is, it goes to show what I'm talking about. But if you look at my phone, you don't see, there's no numbers anywhere. There's no, notifications at the top. If you even pull up the screen, there's nothing there. It's just my screen. It says steadfast. That's my screensaver. There's no numbers next to the app. There's no notifications. You wouldn't know that anybody texted me. You wouldn't know that anybody called me. You wouldn't know that I have any likes or comments or anything on any Instagram or any of it. And I did all that, of course, on purpose, because I don't want my phone to control me. I want to control my phone. Now, you live in a real estate world where you need to be notified for text message and phone calls and things like that. But I believe all of us could, at some level, change our level of notifications on apps or things like that. You can change whether or not you see a number next to an app. You can change whether or not the banner
Yes.
notifications pop up. You can change if a specific app gives a ding or not. So if you start to make small tweaks and changes to those kinds of things, then you can have your attention back to some degree, right? To some level. Now, I'm an extreme because, like I said, my phone makes zero noise outside of ringing. That's literally the only noise it'll make. And like I said, there's no anything on it that you can tell if anybody has communicated with me. I have to actively grab it and pull things up to see if anybody said anything to me. So it's just one simple way that you can do it. Another thing that's been very helpful for me is I have certain times where I check my phone.
Yeah.
So I check it, 9 o'clock, and then again at, I think it's 11 o'clock, 1, 3. So very specific times that I'll check my phone. And that's been very helpful as well, because again, I'm controlling my phone instead of my phone controlling me. And that's what I believe life, if you want to enjoy life and not feel controlled by this random thing, then it allows you to have some level of that back.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think everyone would be happier if they tried to have more control over when they want to talk to people or be interrupted, as opposed to letting people always interrupt you. Because especially like myself and your friend in real estate, if you're trying to do any kind of work where you're thinking about something, like if I have to try and analyze the value of a property with no recent things that have sold around there and nothing like it, and I have to use a lot of brain power trying to figure it out, and it's kind of a difficult problem. It's so difficult, even if it takes 20 minutes. If you're getting interrupted every 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, you just can't, your brain never goes to that deep level. And I've noticed that those kind of tasks where I actually have to think a little bit more than normal, I'll put those off until I can be in a place with no notifications or leave my phone in the other room. And it's annoying, but it's something we have to guard against if we want to keep our sanity. And yeah, what your habits are incredible. Kudos to you for doing that. And yes, I don't think anyone listening to this would be. I think everyone would be happier if they took a bit more ownership on when they choose to interact with their phones.
Yeah, definitely. There's a thing about multitasking, because I think a lot of people hear what you're saying and they're like, well, all you're doing is multitasking, right? Multitasking is just this idea that's been around for maybe a couple of decades at this point, but it's false. It's not true. In other words, you can't multitask. All you do is task switch. You go from one thing to another to another. So in your instance, if you're sitting there having to think about a complex problem, do some numbers, run some numbers, whatever the thing is, and you're jumping back to a text message and then coming back to this thing and then jumping back to the text message, your brain is having to task switch to the text message and then back to the thing. Now, of course, it takes little effort, not zero, but little effort to go to the text message. But then to come back to the problem, you have to figure out where you were. And then you have to think about, okay, well, what's the next step that I was moving toward? So you have to catch your brain back up to where you were and then what you wanted to do next with it. So that task switching is very energy inefficient. It's extremely inefficient as far as energy goes. And it's definitely inefficient as far as getting stuff done goes, because your brain can only focus on a certain kind of task in a period of time. If you want to do something deep, focus on that kind of task for a period of time. If you want to do something, reply to text, reply to emails, do those kind of tasks for a period of time. I mean, and it's tough because we all have different careers, we all have different things going on. But the more you can control that, the more that, number one, your brain will be healthier in the long run, but the more you'll actually be able to be part of life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think about when my dad was a pilot when I was growing up, and it sucked where he'll be away for 5 days. And I remember missing him a lot, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, like a young boy, loves his dad, misses his dad. I'm like, oh man, 4 more sleeps till my dad's back from wherever he was flying. But then he'd be home for 3, 4 days. And he was home. Like he had no cell phone, obviously. No one was calling the house. He would make breakfast. He would take us to school, pick us up from school, take us to activities, hang out with us. And he was really there. He was present. And there's so many times where I've like been with my son. I'm like, I gotta talk to this guy real quick or something. And that's something that I'm really trying to work on is you don't have to, all the parents that I've spoken to, you don't have to always be with your kids. We all have lives, we're all juggling things. But when you're with them, give them attention. Don't be with them fucking looking on Instagram, or don't be with them texting 3 people back. Those people can wait. Like you're never going to get these years back with your son. So I'm really glad. If there's one thing that I've got from you is a good reminder to have better cell phone habits. But I wanted to ask you, I remember in your bio, you talked about, I don't want to say struggling with self-confidence, but having to really work on your self-confidence, even though you had every reason to be confident. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't think there's anyone that can't do with just getting more confidence in life in general.
Yeah, most definitely. So as a high schooler, I was naturally gifted, if you will. Could run fast, could jump high, could do all of those things without a whole lot of work. Like I said, I've been in the weight room for a long time, but I had those things. I was born with some athletic gift. I don't say that to brag, but it's part of the story, right? So recently, I have recognized that as a high schooler and in my college years, because I played football in college as well, that I've had ways to protect myself whenever I felt like someone that was as good as me or better than me would come up against me. I would have ways to protect myself so that I didn't feel beat, so that my confidence didn't get dampened, or so I thought that it wasn't going to get dampened because they beat me. Now, what I was actually doing was killing my confidence because I would not go up against the person. I was just protecting myself instead. So while I had the capabilities available to me and I was putting in effort, I was in the weight room, I would go train, I would do those things regularly. So it's not like I wasn't trying. I still didn't have the mental fortitude to take on the challenge. The confidence in my brain wasn't there. The mindset wasn't there to go and take it on. And like I said, it's really only been, I've thought about it over the last, probably 7 or 8 years, but it's been over the last 3 years or so that I've really been digging in and going, where is this coming from? Why am I having a hard time in business? For instance, I could feel kind of those tendencies coming out in business, protecting myself in certain ways. If the business fails or doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then I can make this excuse because, XYZ happened, or because, this marketing thing just didn't work out, whatever the thing was. So I was doing the same things in business and in my relationships. So I just wanted to figure it out. And while I don't have it figured out per se, I did, that's something that I had carried into my adulthood. And ironically, my now ex-wife kind of helped me going through the divorce because she's like, yeah, that's something that I saw in you pretty regularly. And I didn't know how to say it to you. And sometimes I just wouldn't say it in a productive way. right? I would just tell you, why are you being dumb? Or, why are you making that decision? Instead of going, hey, Jerry, do you not believe that you can do this? Do you not believe in yourself and your capabilities to do it? And that's why listening to your spouse from time to time is a good thing. But nonetheless, actually listening all the time is a good thing. But anyway, nonetheless, to help myself start to work through that, I've changed my focus. Because what I've found is you can believe in yourself to an extent, but until you actually start to take actions for it, that fake it until you make it can only last so long. You can fake confidence for a period of time, but eventually your self goes, I got you figured out, man. This ain't working. So you can have a combination of, hey, you have to exude your level of confidence. Not, oh, I'm this badass and, see what I can do kind of confidence, but speak differently about yourself, think differently about yourself. When you feel yourself doubting yourself, ask why you're doubting yourself and ask yourself if it's true. Well, I don't know if I can do this. Well, is it true? I don't know. I just haven't done it yet. Okay, well, then it just means you haven't done enough things to figure out if you can do it. So part of it is changing your mindset about it, but another part of it is changing what you're focusing on. Because I spent a lot of time focusing on big goals, right? I've always said I was a big goal person, but I spent too much time focusing just on the big goal instead of focusing on celebrating the steps I achieved along the way. Does that make sense? So instead of focusing on, hey, I want to hit this amount of revenue in the business, and that's the only thing I focus on, what I should have been focusing on is I completed all of these tasks for today, and that's moving me to that goal. And then I completed all these tasks for today, and that's moving me to that goal. And that's really how you build. You don't build confidence because you hit a thing. You don't build confidence because you made $1 million. You build confidence because you completed the tasks that you said you were going to do today to get to that $1 million.
You said something so important that I just realized fairly recently is I was always a big goals guy, and I always tied my happiness to whether I got the things that I was trying to achieve or not. And I realize now that if you wait until you achieve things to be happy, you've missed out on life. And I'm going to have goals, hopefully, for the next 50 years, and I'm not going to wait till I'm 95 to be happy. So what you said is exactly the way I would say it. If you're moving every day, you're moving towards the type of person you want to be, and to get the kind of wins that you want to get in life, you have to be happy with that. You can't tie your happiness to waiting to achieve it. Because number one, it might not happen, but best case scenario, it does happen. It might be a year down the road. I'm not going to be happy for a year till I've ticked this box, because you and I, as soon as we achieve a goal, the next goal is just around the corner, and you live your life like that. And when I look back at my youth, I did a lot of really cool things on paper that I can talk about. Was I happy doing them? No, I was so focused on the next thing. And that's a bit of wisdom that I've got as I've got older, and definitely being a parent has made me slow down and just appreciate. Is it nice to have money, success, prestige? I just published a book on real estate investing. That's cool. They're nice milestones to have in life. But what is a good life? A good life is the most amount of really great days. And what in my days, what are some of the favorite things I look forward to is just taking my dogs out with my son and having him come up to me and say, Daddy, let's take the dogs out, and just hug me. It's these little intangibles that they're not on any goal list, but it's just those little moments. And you want as many great moments in a day as you can, as many great days as you can, when it's all said and done. And that's been such a great, I just wanted to emphasize what you said is so true. You were talking about confidence, but I'm talking about happiness. They're kind of they're two benefits of just being appreciative for the small wins, not the big wins. I just think that's such a powerful concept. And I wish I'd had that mindset 15 years ago, because I would have been much happier.
Well, it's funny. So the last 20 minutes of our conversation or so has been around being intentional with the phone, being intentional with your actions, taking the process, being intentional with your kids. We have lost intentionality because we are so busy on our phone, or just trying to keep up with the Joneses, or just trying to get through life. I just want to get through my 9-to-5 job so that I can get home and watch Netflix or do whatever it is I'm going to drain my brain in, instead of being intentional about things. Well, it takes a lot of energy. I have to think about things a lot. It is life. It is the one thing, the one time that you're going to be on this earth, the one time that you're going to be on this earth, as far as we know, the one time. And it's not very long. It's not a very long period of time. The earth is 4.5 billion years old. The universe is 14.5 billion years old. You will live to be 85 on average. That's not a long period of time. And once you're gone, the earth time will continue to move forward. So if you're not intentional about things, then you shouldn't be surprised that you're not achieving things that you want, because you have to be intentional about them. And that's why it's about, I interviewed a guy named Rich Ingram. He was in the military. He lost his arm. He was driving he was the gunner in a Humvee, and they hit a bomb and they flipped. And he's like, yeah, usually the gunner dies, but I made it. But I went to get up and run, and I felt my arm dingling, or not dangling. He felt like he broke his arm, and he went to go like this. And he's like, there was nothing there. I'm like, whoa. So he said he actually grabbed his arm and started running. Anyway, he said it's the process, not the product. In other words, that's why it's not about the thing. It's not about having the stuff or staying on top of everything or sitting there scrolling. It's about doing what's necessary. And that actually allows you to give time to do what you're talking about, to be with kids. When you're intentional about your time, then you can be more intentional about being with your kids, because then you're not erratic with your actions. You're not erratic with, oh, I forgot to do this thing for work, or I forgot to do this thing on my to-do list. When you're intentional about it and you set aside specific times to do specific things and so on and so forth, then you can actually build in blocks of just being with family, or sitting and reading, or going on vacation and things like that. So it is in the having rules that you find freedom.
Yeah.
It is not in living freely that you find freedom.
Yeah. That's that Jocko book. What is it? Discipline is freedom. It's so true. It's like when you live a disciplined life, you're actually much freer, because you take out the day-to-day decision making. Every morning, not first thing, but early on in the day, I'm in the cold plunge. I know I'm going to get a workout at some point. They're the non-negotiables. I know I'm going to spend time with my son. I know I'm going to get the work done that I have to get done. I don't even, there's no decision fatigue, because there's no decision. I just do it. And I think that's such a freeing way to live. And that's actually one thing I want to talk to you about. I know you're fond of talking about building discipline from scratch. And if I look at people around me, Jerry, I think one of the biggest things that's impeding people's happiness and success is their lack of discipline. I don't think, like we were just talking about, discipline is freedom. I don't think there's anyone that would not benefit from a bit more discipline in their life. I'd love to talk a little bit about, if you can give some tips on trying to build discipline for someone who's kind of scattered and they don't have much discipline and every day is different and they're not where they want to be in life.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest thing that keeps people from making progress. It's discipline, which is wrapped around just not wanting to take responsibility for things, but it is discipline. So I think the first thing is doing what we're talking about, changing your mindset about what discipline is to you. Most people look at discipline and they're like, oh, well, that's restricting. And, it's going to lead to a miserable life because I'm not going to be able to do the quote fun things that I want to do, like go out and drink and go out and do this. You only think currently that those things are fun because you've convinced yourself that living this high level, instant gratification seeking life is what you want, this dopamine seeking life where you're constantly just wanting hits and hits of dopamine. But I think most of those people have this underlying angst about what they actually want to achieve and why they're not achieving that thing. So first is just switching your mindset about it. Discipline, like we said, discipline is freedom. When you set rules, when you set boundaries, you are free to be the best version of yourself within the boundaries that you've set. There's nothing to think about. There's nothing to contemplate. There's nothing to question or so on and so forth and worry about. You set it. You set the boundaries. You have. That's important. You have done it. And then you can just be free to do it. So I think that's the first thing, is changing your mindset about it. The next thing then that needs to happen is stop making things so complex. Stop thinking that things are so complex. So I'll give nutrition as an example. For some reason, people want to try every new diet that comes out. The carnivore diet, the keto diet, intermittent fasting, this, that, and the other thing. And there's got to be some sort of secret out there, right? There's got to be some sort of secret that people aren't telling me to be able to lose weight, to be able to get a six pack, to be able to do this, be able to do that. There's no secret. And this is just one example, but there's no secret. Just don't make it complex. It's very simple. Decide what you want, decide what you want to do, set it, and then do it. The problem is people first overthink things. They contemplate about doing something, and then they think more about it, and then they do some research, and then they think more about it, and then they try it, and it doesn't work out in the first 6 weeks, and then they quit. So don't overthink it. Most of the things that you have found that might work will work. Try it. Do it. Just decide and then do it. Set it and then do it. Quit overthinking things and quit making things so complex. Once you've done that, decide the tasks that you want to do. Decide the things that you want to make non-negotiables in your life, and then start following through with them. Because right now, you are the kind of person that does not follow through with what you say. If you've tried exercise and then quit, and then tried a diet and then quit, it is that you are the type of person that doesn't follow through with what you say. That's all. So when you do it again, you're not surprised by it yourself. Oh, this is just what I did last time. Fine. But if you start to actually follow through, I did my nutrition today. Good. I did it. I did my nutrition today again. Good. I did it. And you keep doing that just one day at a time, then you build discipline, but you do it one day at a time. It's not because you achieved a thing. It's because today you did what you said you were going to do. And then the next day, I did what I said I was going to do. Do it, and then recognize it. I did that. That was me. That's like me. I'm the kind of person that follows through with what I say I'm going to do. So you just can't make it more than what it is. Change your mindset about it. Say what you're going to do. Do what you say you were going to do. Remind yourself that you did it.
That idea of following through is being a man of your word to yourself. It's such an interesting thing because there's being a man of your word. Like you tell a friend, I'll be there this time. I'll help you out with something. Yeah. You got someone counting on you. That's easy. But if you just tell yourself today, I want to run 6 miles. And then you get tied up with work and it's 10 o'clock and you just want to watch Netflix and your back hurts and you're tired and feeling lazy. And you're like, no, I kind of said I wanted to do that. So I'm going to go and run at 11 p.m. just to get it in because I want to be the person that trusts his own narrative to himself and be the kind of person who, when he says something, he does it. I've done that so many times and I'm cursing myself. I'm so pissed off, Jerry. I'm like, I had a small break in the middle of my day where I could have got this in, but I got tied up at work or doing some stupid thing when now I got to suffer now. Now I got to run at midnight because I said I would be that. I said I would do it. I want to be that kind of guy. That's something that I've always thought I was for the longest time. I was like, what's wrong with me? And now I realize that that's what it was. It was about me keeping my word to myself. And that's such a powerful concept. Jerry, I'd love to ask, because you mentioned earlier that you're a natural introvert, that you have a podcast and you obviously have things to say. So you have an extroverted side. You're online, so you're trying to get clients and be personable, right, to build your business. Have you forced yourself to become more extroverted, or is it just a case of, you've got to do it, and then being introverted is the way you kind of recharge your batteries?
Yes. Yeah, it is both of those things. I eventually realized that if I, like with the business example, I started doing this with whenever I opened the fitness studio. I realized that if I wanted to be good at it, that I needed to be able to communicate with people. I needed to be able to articulate a message. I needed to be able to bring energy up when I needed to bring it up and bring it down when I needed to bring it down. So it was a necessity that then I had to just build. I had to build. And of course, it's not easy, but it is, again, it's just a simple process. You just have to decide to do it, and then you have to just start doing it. For instance, a couple of things that I did. I was part of the Chamber of Commerce back then, and whenever they they'd do workshop series from time to time. And anytime they did a workshop series, I'd offer to do a workshop. So I would get up there, I would practice as much as I could just on my own and I'd be in front of my whiteboard and I'd practice and I'd video it and I'd watch it so that I could be prepared when I'd go up there. Then I would give, that's one way for me to practice is by giving a workshop. I also joined Toastmasters. Did that for, I think, 6 months or something. It's a weekly meeting. And you go in, and during most Toastmasters, you get to talk every time, but it's maybe for 5 minutes at a time. But it's amazing how most people just to stand up in front of 20 people and talk for 5 minutes is so frightening for most people. And yet you can work through it if you just go and set some things into play. But yeah, I mean, it was a necessity and I knew that it had to be done. So I went and did it. Like you said, you look at me and you're like, most people wouldn't think I'm a natural introvert, but it's because I've built it into myself. But yeah, at the same time, I'm totally happy just hanging out with myself if I need to.
Well, I think there was one of the old philosophers. I'm blanking on which one, but he said the ability to sit still with yourself is a superpower, and that's something that is very powerful. So many people, they need to be around energy or action. They can't just sit still with their own thoughts. So that is a superpower. Brother, last thing I'd love to ask you, if you're running out of time, what's any recent books you've read that have really been impactful?
So I can give you an author because I've read like 6 of this guy's books over the last month. And then I can give you one specific book. So there's a guy named Nathaniel Branden, and he's written a lot about self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-respect. He actually was in a relationship for a long time with Ayn Rand, who is the girl who wrote Atlas Shrugged, if you've ever heard of that book. She also wrote a book called Fountainhead. If you have not read Atlas Shrugged, by the way, first of all, it's 1,000 pages long, so just be prepared, or go get the Cliff Notes version. Cliff Notes are probably 500 pages long, but it's a beautiful book. It is such a good book, and I don't read fiction. I don't, but that was such a good book. Anyway, so he's very in depth about, like I said, building self-confidence, taking personal responsibility. He talks a lot about just responsibility itself and freedom through taking responsibility. And then the other book that has had a big impact on me is a book called Power versus Force, or it might be Force versus Power. And what he talks about is the levels of consciousness, it's a little bit of a dense book, but I think you especially, I know you could get through it, but the levels of consciousness that we have. So essentially, each individual person only sees what we allow ourselves to see. And until we open up our mind to be able to see more, not literally see more, partly, but mentally see more, then we won't do it. So whenever you have a conversation with somebody who's really just high intellect, really smart person, and they're talking to you and you're like, man, I have no clue what's happening right now. I can't process this. I can't. And it's not because you're dumb, but it's because their level of consciousness is just a little higher than yours and you're just not prepared to take it in. So that was a very interesting book that just helped me understand how we can open our eyes to reality more.
I love that. And brother, just a quick, I know you got to run, but the Fountainhead changed my life, Jerry. I had I worked for a trading company that sent me to the US, and I hated my boss. He made my life miserable. So he ended up, the only nice thing he did is he bought me the Fountainhead because he would see me reading when things were slow. And I read it and I was like, I want to set up my own trading company and just, and not be under the, working with an awful boss. But I love what I did, the actual trading. So I read the book, quit, set up my own trading company, and that gave me the financial freedom to follow a lot of passions and do my own thing and start my life as an entrepreneur. So I always say that's probably the most impactful book I've ever read. So that's so cool with a husband, Nathaniel. I'm gonna check out some of his work. So I never even knew he wrote. So that'll be awesome, brother. I know you got to run. Shoot me an email with any links. I'll put them in the show notes. And yeah, I'm so glad we met, man. I knew before we even started this, we were kindred spirits. And there's one thing that I've got from this, Jerry. It's be more intentional myself. And I can always use the excuse, oh, it's hard with my job. Yeah, it's hard, but it's not impossible. I can still have better boundaries. So I really appreciate that, man. Thank you.
I appreciate you as well. And like I said, it was actually a good reminder to me to be more intentional as well, because we all need reminders. I can talk about it all day long, but I still need to be reminded.
That's so true, brother. Well, listen, I know you got to run. Let's talk soon.
Appreciate you.